A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver. The Lone Ranger. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Come on, Silver. Let's go, big fella. I'll Silver. Aye!
For months, an outlaw gang had been operating in the territory near Lawson, Texas. In spite of all efforts by the law to trace them, the outlaws were smart enough to cover all trails and avoid capture. The puzzling factor was that the gang knew when and where to strike, regardless of what precautions were taken. The most recent happening was when Cy Milbank of the Bar M Ranch drove cattle to the stockyards near Lawson one morning. Cy went to the bank to deposit the large amount of money he had received from the cattle buyer's agent.
Good afternoon, Silas. I expected you'd be in today when I saw you and your hands go through town driving the herd to the stockyard.
Howdy, Banker Slade. I have a tidy sum to put into my account. We got a fine price this time for those longhorns.
Glad to hear it. Just step over to the teller's window and he'll take care of you.
All right.
Brakes, everybody. This is the holdup.
And the first one to move gets slugged. Hey, get over there and keep your hands up. Yeah. All right.
Well, mister, I reckon you were just going to deposit that cattle money. But you won't have to go to the trouble. I'll take it.
Masked outlaws, huh? Well, I'm not
Give
going
me
to...
that. Now, shut up and don't move, or by thunder, you won't live to talk about it.
Hey, hurry up. I saw somebody running into the sheriff's office. Let's get going.
And we'll have to forget the bank cash for now. There's plenty of cash in this roll. Let's go.
Too bad they robbed you, Silas. Good thing they got scared off before they robbed the bank, too. But I'm sorry about your cattle money, though.
Well, let's get after it. Come on.
The following morning, after a fruitless search, the sheriff met with Silas Milbank, Mr. Slade the banker, and with other victims of the outlaw gang. The meeting was held in Mr. Slade's office at the bank.
Sheriff, as owner of the mining company, I demand something be done about that gang. My manager and I were both wounded a few months ago, and a large payroll was stolen.
The gold shipment they took from the stage was from my bank. The loss wasn't fully covered by insurance, so I took a beat.
You see?
Well, most of that loss was taken by the Wells Fargo Company. You were lucky, Mr. Slade.
I was lucky yesterday. If they hadn't been scared off, the bank might have had to take a mighty big loss, Sheriff.
Slade is right about that.
They weren't scared off until after they grabbed my cattle money, Mr. Slade. I lost close to $15,000, and it was lost right in your bank.
No use hashing over what's happened. We're here to decide what's going to be done about all these robberies and killings.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Everything possible is being done. Some of my men are out right now hunting the outlaws. I don't like to go too far from the town myself. There's no telling when or where they'll strike again.
The law's far too lax.
One thing I remember during that hold-up in the bank yesterday,
Yes?
one of the outlaws yelled at someone to just run into the sheriff's office. But you didn't come to the bank until the cashier went after you.
Nobody came running into my office. The outlaw must have been seeing things.
Well, I'm glad he thought he saw someone and it scared the others into leaving.
I say we should have more protection from the law.
We're doing all we can. Got to go back to my office. I'll appoint a few more deputies, and we'll really keep our eyes peeled. And sooner or later, we'll get a line on that gang of killers. When we do, they'll wind up on the end of a rope.
Now, Sheriff, I'm just telling you, it's better to be sooner.
That evening, the Lone Ranger and Tonto arrived in the hills outside of Lawson and made camp. Tonto went to town for supplies, and darkness had fallen by the time he returned to camp. He told the Lone Ranger about the many robberies that had taken place near Lawson. As the masked man listened attentively, Tonto related the details of each robbery according to what he had heard in town. When he finished, the Lone Ranger was thoughtful for a moment. Then he spoke.
Tonto, it seems odd to me that if no one but the banker, the mine owner, and his manager knew the payroll was to go ahead of time on the buckboard, the outlaws learned of it.
It mighty funny them find out.
Then there's a shipment of gold on the Wells Fargo stage. I wonder how they found out about that.
Me wonder, too.
Their timing was more or less perfect when they walked into the bank and took over the rancher's cattle money. If the rancher had made the deposit, the bank would have had to take the loss. So it was timely from that standpoint.
That right.
There must be someone in town who tips that gang off about such things.
Maybe.
If someone could find the man who was spying for them.
Him lead way to gang, maybe.
That's the general idea.
You think a way find out about spy in town?
I have an idea, Tonto. It might work.
What you think, Kimasabi?
Now, my plan is to disguise myself as a wealthy Easterner. Then I'll go to the next town and ride the stage back here to Lawson.
Why you do that?
Tonto, I'm going to have a talk with each of the men most concerned in those robberies.
After disguising himself as a wealthy businessman from Kansas City, the Lone Ranger rode with Tonto to the next town 10 miles away. There he boarded the stage for Lawson, and Tonto led Silver back to the camp in the hills near town. The following morning, the owner of the mining company looked across his desk at the tall, prosperous stranger who sat there.
Which you sent in that you're interested in buying mining stock. Is that correct, Mr. Jones?
That's right. I hear you have a profitable mine here.
Our company's doing very well, sir. But if you're thinking of investing in our stock, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. We have no stock for sale.
Well, perhaps if the time comes when you do have, you'll let me know.
Of course.
Meanwhile, if you decide there might be some of the stock available before I leave town, please get in touch with me at the Lawson house.
Very well, Mr. Jones. But as I said...
I might add that I carry a large sum of cash with me so that if something did turn up, I can always close a deal quickly.
Very good idea, Mr. Jones. Believe me, if any stock were available, I'd tell you now.
Thank you anyway for talking to me. I'll not take any more of your time, and goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Jones.
Later that day, the Lone Ranger, still wearing the disguise of an Eastern businessman, entered the office of the Wells Fargo Express Company in Lawson and hinted he might ship a large sum of money. Then he went to the Lawson Bank and inquired for the banker. He was soon shown into Mr. Slade's office. As the impressive-looking stranger sat down, Mr. Slade appraised him carefully, then said,
Well, Mr. Jones, the cashier told me you wanted to see me on very important business.
It's important to me, Mr. Slade, and it may be to you. As the local banker, I decided you'd be the one to advise me about going into business here.
Now, what kind of business do you have in mind?
Well, perhaps a freight and stage line.
The present stage line has all the business, Mr. Jones.
Well, I've even thought of ranching. If I decided to buy a large ranch, I could pay a substantial down payment. In fact, knowing that as the town banker, I can trust you. I don't mind telling you I've plenty of cash in my hotel room right now. I might make a down payment of $10,000.
Well, that's interesting.
You know of a good buy?
Offhand, I know of 2 or 3 spreads that might sell. Why don't you go to your hotel and wait until you hear from me?
Oh, very well, sir. If I don't hear from you by tomorrow noon, I'll go on to Pecos and look around.
Well, you'll hear from me. I promise you that, Mr. Jones. We bankers in the West are anxious to have enterprising men from the East settle here. We need far-sighted and progressive people. I promise you'll hear from me before noon tomorrow.
A short time later, the Lone Ranger and Tonto met in a wooded grove at the edge of town.
Hi, Kimasabi.
Aye.
Me wait, see you walking from town. Silver plenty glad to see you.
I've missed him. Good boy. Tonto, I'm going back to the hotel. You come there with the horses and wait among the trees behind the buildings. I hope before the evening's over, we'll find out who's behind the gang we're after. Then we'll go into action.
The curtain falls on the first act of our Lone Ranger adventure. Before the next exciting scenes, please permit us to pause for just a few moments. Now to continue. After meeting and impressing the 3 men he considered were in position to give valuable information to the outlaw gang, the Lone Ranger left Tonto and waited for results in the hotel room he'd engaged. Meantime, the mine owner went to town to confer with the banker, Mr. Slade. The 2 men were talking in Slade's office.
Well, sir, what is it you want my advice about?
Just this, Mr. Slade. There's an Eastern businessman in town from Kansas City. He's stopping at the Lawson house.
Well?
He came to see me. Thought he could buy stock in the mining company. Man's name is Jones. From what he says, he carries a lot of cash with him.
Are you going to sell stock to him?
Well, I told him there was no stock for sale. But after thinking it over, I decided I might change my mind. I could use some cash right now.
Why did you come to me?
Well, I thought you'd be able to tell me the value of the mining stock at this time.
I'd say $100 a share would be a good price.
$100 a share, huh? Well, I'll think it over.
A short time later, the Lone Ranger heard someone knocking on the door of his hotel room.
Note for Mr. Jones, sir.
Let me see. Dear Mr. Jones, I've thought over your offer to buy some of the mining company's stock. If possible, will you come out to the mining office tonight and we'll discuss the matter again? Sincerely, J.B. Parlin. This may be what I'm hoping for. I'll get Tonto and we'll ride out there right away.
Half an hour later, in the bright moonlight, the Lone Ranger and Tonto rode along the trail toward the mining company office outside of town.
Me not savvy. Why you go see mine owner if you not want buy stock, Kimasabi?
Well, if he's sincere, I'll talk my way out of it. But this may be some kind of trick. In that case, we may find out what we're after.
Oh.
The office isn't very far from town. After I talk with the fellow now. Who's it? Who's got? That shot came from the gully over there. I saw some movement, but I looked to the left, Tonto. Someone's riding away fast.
We see two riders. Them ride long gully.
We'll let them go for the time being and go on to the mining office. Come on, Silver.
Up, Scout.
Before long, the Lone Ranger and Tonto pulled to a stop in front of the mining office.
Oh, Silver.
Easy, Scout.
Wait here, Tonto. I'll not be long.
You wait.
Who is it?
I received your note and came to see you.
Oh, Mr. Jones. You speak of a note. I didn't send you a note.
Oh?
I went to town and talked to Mr. Slade at the bank about your proposition to buy mining stock. I thought I might agree to sell some, but he suggested I'd think it over for 24 hours.
Oh, sorry I bothered you, Mr. Parlin. I'll go back to the hotel and perhaps see you in the morning.
All right. Sorry you came out here for nothing. You mentioned a note.
I'm sure it was some mistake. Good night, sir.
Good night.
You not go inside.
No, he didn't send that note, Tonto. Easy, steady, big fella.
Easy, fella.
I'm beginning to put the riddle together now. Let's get back to town. Come on, Silver.
Come up, Scout.
The two men rode hurriedly back to town and entered the rear door of the hotel. They went to the room the masked man had engaged.
Look, Tonto, the room is a shambles. Small satchel I hid behind the bureau is gone.
What you carrying bag?
While I waited in Red Bank for the stage to come back to Lawson, I had the banker put 2 packets of $1 bills with a $100 bill on the top of each packet.
Oh, why you do that?
Each of those bills is marked, Tonto. I put the 2 packets into the small satchel. At casual glance, anyone would think there were thousands of dollars in each packet.
Oh, now me savvy.
Whoever sent me that note a while ago expected I might carry my cash with me to the mining office and tried to have me waylaid. Meanwhile, someone searched this room. I have a good idea who's behind this now. But to catch him red-handed, we'll have to move fast. Come on, Tonto.
When the Lone Ranger left the hotel through the back door, he put on his black mask over his disguised features. Then he and Tonto went to their horses, waiting among the trees.
Tonto, go to the sheriff's office first, then come back here to join me.
There go 2 riders. Seem like same 2 men who ride from gully tonight.
I hope so. Will help if they go where I think they're going. Now, I'll tell you what to say to the sheriff, and I'll wait here until you get back.
Later, Max and Spike arrived at the small ranch banker Slade owned outside of town. They told of the unsuccessful attempt to ambush the stranger from the east. Slade confided that he had searched the stranger's hotel room and stolen a satchel of money. He lifted the satchel to a table.
I'll open it.
Hey, look. 2 fat packets of bills. Must be plenty there.
Yeah, Max. You count that packet.
All right.
I'll count what's in this packet. Now, wait a minute. Something strange about this. Now, these are all $1 bills, with the exception of the $100 bill on top.
What? Why, this packet is made up the same way.
That Easterner must have been a big 4-flusher. I'd like to...
Reach, all of you.
Hey, what? Hey, mask hombre. We're 3 against 1. Got him. No! My wrist.
Come on, Spike. We'll fight our way out of here.
Freeze, both of you.
The sheriff at the window.
Yeah, and an Indian just behind the masked man.
Drop your guns. You can't win. If you don't want to get bullets, drop them.
Yeah, we better do it, Spike.
Yeah.
Sheriff, what is this? The fact that you're with a masked man may mean you're in with the gang that's been robbing us.
Don't try to bluff, Slade.
We were all just outside that partly open window and heard all your conversation.
That's the cash that was taken from the hotel room, Sheriff.
Sheriff, you can't prove anything.
Those bills are marked with red ink. I marked them, each with a small X in the right-hand corner on the front.
Well, I'll check them. Yep, there's the X marked in red ink on every one of them.
That proves Slade stole those bills from the hotel room. He knew the money was there.
How would I? I never saw you before.
Oh, take another look. I'll remove the mask.
Oh, Easter?
Not really an Easterner, just a disguise. Sheriff, I suspected somebody in this town was leading those gunmen in the robberies and killings. So I went to those I thought could be the leader and who'd know certain facts. I told the express agent, the mining company owner, and this man Slade that I carried a large sum of cash with me.
That right?
When I received a note supposedly from the mine owner Parlin to come to the mining office, I went there and found out he didn't write or send it. He told me he'd talked to Slade about the stock I seemingly wanted to buy. And it was then that I knew Banker Slade was the man we were after.
Hey, that's hard to believe. He sure fooled everybody.
He fooled us, all right. He was the man behind the gang. Those marked bills, along with what we heard them saying a while ago, are evidence against Slade he can't turn aside. We'll return the cash to the masked man after the trial.
Now, wait, Sheriff. Max and Spike brought me those marked bills. They're the men who were responsible.
Stop trying to lie out of it, Slade. You planned everything for us.
No, I didn't. Now, listen, Sheriff. You've got to listen to me
Shut up,
while...
Slade. Thanks to the masked man and Indian, we finally caught up with you. And I think that we ought to... Hey, where are they?
They eased out a minute ago.
Yeah, he put on his mask and left.
Sheriff, you haven't explained that mask. Why should a man like Jones get away that way?
Slade, if you were as smart as you think you are, you'd have figured out by now his name isn't Jones. He already told you he's not an Easterner.
Well, then who is he?
A mighty clever hombre. He sure fooled you with that disguise he wore. Nobody ever sees his real face. He always wears a mask when he isn't disguised. You see, that hombre's no other than the Lone Ranger.
This is a feature of the Lone Ranger Incorporated, created by George W. Trendle, produced by Trendle Campbell Muir Incorporated, directed by Charles D. Livingston, and edited by Fran Stryker. The part of the Lone Ranger is played by Brace Beamer.